Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivara Jaya Gopi Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivara Jaya Sodanandana Bhajajana Hanjanaya Yasodanandana Bhajajana Hanjanaya Jamunatira Havana Daham Jamunatira Havana Shahadijam Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Jai Gopi Janavallabha Girivara Jaya Gopi Gopi Janavallabha Jai Gopi Janavallabha Girivara Jaya Giri Hari Jasodanandana Gajadhana Hanjaya Yasodanandana Gajadhana Hanjaya Jamunatira Havana Shahadi Jamunat Jamunatira Havana Shahadi Jamunat Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunjabi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hey Kunjam Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram Ram Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hey Krishna, Krishna, Gauranga, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Nitai Gaur, Hare Rama, Rama Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Name Krishna Krishna, Vibho Hare Ram, Ram Ram, and Nitai Gaur, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaur, Hare Ram, Nitai Gaur, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. Gauranga, hey Gauranga, Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Hey, Jaya Kishore Kishore, Kishore Kishore, Kishore Kishore, Jai Kishore Kishore, Kishore. Jai Kishore Kishore, Kishore Kishore, Kishore Kishore, Jai Kishore Kishore, Kishore Kishore, Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, Jagannath, Jai Jagannath. Oh, Hari 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 Tiger. Hari Hari Tiger, Hari Go to Premanande, Hari Hari Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahans Parivajaka Astotar Satta Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya, His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Raj Grantha Srimad Bhagvatam ki Jai. Sri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai. Sri Sri Kishore Kishori ki Jai. Sri Sri Gaurnitai ki Jai. Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki Jai. Gaur Premanande. Glories to the assembled devotees, glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. You have to not put the Vyasasana in the same line with Prabhupada, because you can't see Prabhupada then. And Prabhupada has to look over your head to see the deities. So always keep it behind this side. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 6, Chapter 5. Narada Muni cursed by Prajapati Daksha, text number 23. Nasam simya put Nasham sim Nasam nisamya putranam Naradats chila salinam Antatapyataka chochan Suprajastvam suchampadam Nasam nisayam putranam Naradats chila salinam Anvatapyataka chochan Suprajastvam suchampadam Nasham nisamya putranam Naradachila salinam Anvatapyataka chochan Suprajastvam suchampadam Ladies. Nasam, the loss, nisamya, hearing of, putranam, of his sons, Naradat, from Narada, Sila Salinam, who were the best of well-behaved persons, Anvatapyata, suffered, Ka, Prajapati Daksha, Shochan, lamenting, Suprajastvam, having 10,000 well-behaved sons, Sucham, of lamentation, Padam, Position. Translation, purport, by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The Haryasvas, the sons of Prajapati Daksha, were very well behaved, cultured sons, but unfortunately, because of their instructions of Narada Muni, they deviated from the order of their father. When Daksha heard this news, which was brought to him by Narada Muni, he began to lament. Although he was the father of such good sons, he had lost them all. Certainly, this was lamentable. Purport. The Haryasvas, the sons of Prajapati Daksha, were certainly well behaved, learned, and advanced. In accordance with the order of their father, they went to perform austerities to beget good sons for the family. But Narada Muni took advantage of their good behavior and culture to properly direct them to not be involved with material world, but to use their culture and knowledge to end their material affairs. The Haryasvas abided by the order of Narada Muni, but when the news of this was brought to Prajapati Daksha, Prajapati, instead of being happy with the actions of Narada Muni, was extremely sorrowful. Similarly, we are trying to bring as many young men as possible to the Krishna consciousness movement for their ultimate benefit. But the parents of the young men joining this movement, being very sorry, are lamenting and making counter-propaganda. Of course, Prajapati Daksha did not make propaganda against Narada Muni, but later, as we shall see, Daksha cursed Narada Muni for his benevolent activities. This is the way of materialistic life. A materialistic father and mother want to engage their sons in begetting children, striving for improved economic conditions, and rotting in the materialistic life. They are not unhappy when their children become spoiled, useless citizens, but they lament when they join the Hare Krishna movement to achieve the ultimate goal of life. This animosity between parents and the Krishna conscious movement has existed since time immemorial. Even Narada Muni was condemned, not to speak of others. Nevertheless, Narada never gave up his mission to deliver as many fallen souls as possible. He continues playing his musical instrument and vibrating the transcendental sound, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Agyan Timirandasya Kanajana Salakaya Chaksu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Staptitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadammayam Tadati Swam Padantikam Bandeham Shiguro Shiyutapadegamalam Shigurun Vaishnavamscha Shirupam Sagrajatam Sahaganat Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sarvadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakam Vitamscha. Hey Krishna, Karuna Sindhu, Dina Bandhu Jagatpate, Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute, Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavaneswari, Vrishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye, Vancha Kalpa Tarubhischa Kripa Sindhu Bevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaho Namaha, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we're seeing a little bit of a dichotomy here between qualified parents and great souls. As Prabhupada said, it's the history of the world. Now Narada knows that the goal of life is to become Krishna conscious.
And he also knows that time is also very important in bringing about that. Sometimes we see parents, they're in favor of spirituality for their children, but they say, first, get your education, get a nice position, get a nice wife, husband, get a family, be successful in this world. And when you get old, you can't do anything else. Chant Hare Krishna. Right? They make it sound like they're in favor, but not now. Don't you understand that the reason why I brought you up is to make money and be happy enjoying that money? Yes. So many things. Money can make so many things happen, right? Without money, there's no honey. So this is the world today. And parents, and we see, of course, to make a little bit of distinction, I don't want to sound a little prejudiced either one way or the other, but we see that within the Indian families, because the families are so strong, because of cultural upbringing and religious training, there's such a tight knit amongst families that the parents already have all the ideas of what their children should be doing in life, even before the children can think about that. And they're very enthusiastic to make sure their children understand that. And therefore, because of that, we find that although people who are coming from the Indian culture are very much situated in the principle of piety and understand the importance of worshiping God, they don't want to take it too far. They don't want to go beyond what required in order to, make money, because making money is also one of the dharmas, right? That's an important dharma. There was one situation in India where one young man joined the temple in Chaupati, became a brahmachari, and his mother was, I guess his parents were quite upset, and so this was in the back of the early days in the temple when things were quite basic. The living conditions were quite simple. In fact, even below standards, we might say. There was hardly any room to sleep, and people were living in one big room or some small room on the side, and sleeping the same. So the mother, she was determined to bring her son back away from that situation, save him from Krishna. She wanted to rescue him from the lotus feet of Krishna. So she said to all the devotees there happened to be assembled one day that, my son must come home now. She made a big spectacle out of it in front of everybody. And, no one really was taking her too serious, including her son. But then there was a light socket hanging from the ceiling. She said, if you don't come home now, I'm going to stick my finger in that socket. In other words, she was going to commit suicide in front of everybody. Pretty heavy, So, the devotees got a little concerned. And the son was thinking, this is not good. If I lose my mother, I might not be able to concentrate chanting Hare Krishna too good. So he decided to go home. But after some time, he lost interest in family life again, and he came back. So again, she made another, this was a repeat performance. She tried it again, but this time nobody called her bluff. And she didn't do it, and the boy just stayed. So we see in some cases how drastic it is. In America, it was really drastic. I don't know, maybe even some of you have some experience. Back in the 70s, there was many organizations formed around recapturing their children from these, what we say, small religious movements, which they had given the name cult to. And there's a denotative definition of cult, and there's a connotative definition of cult. They were using the connotative definition. That means what they think the cult is. That means is that it's a somewhat of a secret, very clandestine, not very healthy form of lifestyle that centers around some kind of man worship that somebody has created. And, the denotative is cult comes from the word culture, which means small religious movement. Really, Christianity was a cult when it was small, but when it grew into a major religion, it actually became out. The definitions were adjusted, or the titles were adjusted. So, using the connotated definitions, many of these organizations sprung up and were very active with support of many parents and a lot of money. And some even government agencies were backing them. And they would come sometimes in the middle of the night or at another time and physically capture a young man out of the temple and drag him back home. And depending on how fixed he was, there was a reorientation process to get back to material consciousness. And they would keep them in the room and berate them and criticize the religion. And it was just harassment. And this went on for a long time. Of course, it was against the law. And therefore, some of these agencies were put in jail. For a little while, they paid a little fine, got out, and did the same thing again. In fact, I know many of my friends, or people who I was practicing devotional service, had also been captured and taken away. There was one quite wealthy family. They came to New Vrindavan, and they paid $20,000 to get their son back from. He was really fixed. He was really he's actually a sannyasi now. And he used to read Srimad Bhagvatam all day. And so his parents, they came and they hired these very, what we say, physically strong persons to capture him. Took him to a room, and for 3 days, he made like he was deprogrammed. And then when he got the chance, he ran back to the temple. And then they decided to do it again, and they paid $17,000 the second time. So that was $37,000, and that was back in the 70s, or early 80s. So you can imagine how much that much money is. That time, it's like 50 times, not 50 times, but at least 10 times more now. The dollar value has changed. And this time, they tried to break him, but it was obvious that the deprograms had to let him go. They say, we can't break this guy, he's too good, he's too strong. So they had to let him go. And he came back, and I remember his parents came to New Vrindavan to meet him after that, just to see what their son was active in. And I saw them walking around and looking at everything, and I was like... So there was a very strong movement. Our organization and Children of God was another small group. Those two groups were the target of the anti-cult organizations. And it went on for years. We had law cases. Even one of the head deprograms who was famous around the country, Ted Patrick, he used to get on television. And one time, Hridayananda Maharaj debated him on television. It was a public debate. You've seen that film? Yeah. And the guy was a total fool. I mean, not foolish, but total fool. He couldn't even speak correctly, what to speak of coming up with any logical suggestions. So, this went on. Right, Jitendriya, in those days, I guess you lost a few here too in Chicago. Practically every temple got invaded by the anti-cult movement. And a lot of it, there was a whole group of parents that organized themselves, Parents Against the Hare Krishnas. I don't know exactly what they were called, but they were involved with hiring all these people and trying to get their children back. So it was a pretty strong thing that went on for years and years and years. And then one mother of one of our great sannyasis, Jaipataka Maharaj's mother, she organized parents for the Hare Krishnas. Yeah, out in California, she started a movement. Prabhupada was very pleased with her and how she organized some other parents who had some favorable, but in a very organized way, they spoke up against all these other parents who were, performing all these other activities. So that was a pretty heavy time. But you can see, as Prabhupada says, this is nothing new. It's just a tendency of parents to want their children to be good materialists, right? It's all right if you want to chant Hare Krishna, but don't get too serious. Don't get too serious, because then it'll interfere with your goal of life. The goal of life is to enjoy your senses as much as possible, right? Everybody knows that. That's the, Maya Samhita. But everyone's doing it, but no one's really getting any real satisfaction from that. They keep trying. What is that? Napashyati, napanyati, napashyati. Napanyati, napashyati. Second canto Bhagavatam. Everyone sees that everyone is enjoying sense gratification and not becoming happy. Still, they do the same thing anyway. They see, but they don't see. Napanyati, napashyati. I see that this is what you're doing and you're not getting the fulfillment, but I'm going to do the same thing anyway because I know how to do it better than you. Right? That's material life. Material life gives you this false hope that if you just keep trying, nobody's been successful yet, but you're different. You have the inner angle of the understanding of how to become successful in enjoying the senses in such a way that it becomes unlimited. It becomes raganuga, indriya, the indriyas become engaged in raganuga activities, enjoying as much sense gratification. But nobody's happy. Why? Because it's not possible. You can't be happy by something that doesn't give you happiness. It's just the way it is. The senses are limited, and the mind and the senses are under the influence of the modes of material nature, which are always dragging the living entity to various types of activities. Mitche Mayra Vase, Kacho Ha Bubu Bai Jeev Krishna Das, Hey, Vishwash, Kole Dharan Dukanai. Jiva, you're getting tossed by the waves of material energy. Karanan Guna Sangoso, Sarasa Joni Samjanmasi. Sometimes you enjoy in the higher planets as a demigod. Sometimes in this material world as a human being, some suffering, some happiness. Sometimes in the lower situation, sometimes in the animal bodies. And this is the jivas being thrown. But still, people cannot understand how the value of life is something different than what is being told to us. So everyone is pushing in that direction, like that. So it's just the way it is. So to become Krishna conscious, we have so many obstacles. There's obstacles internally, there's obstacles externally. Sometimes we wonder what is more. Of course, the obstacles internally are more formidable than the obstacles externally. But even the obstacles externally can cause one to lose enthusiasm and retreat on the path of bhakti, especially attachment to family. Srila Prabhupada, one thing did say about Western society. He said, it is one thing I can say about you Westerners, you're not so much attached to your families. And this, because of that, you've come to Krishna consciousness. Because it's usually in Western society, family life is quite dysfunctional. That's giving it a good title. It's more like a disaster. Dysfunctional. But we see in the Indian society, culture, like that, people have very strong values, and children are brought up in a proper way. And therefore, the family becomes really the focus within the Indian society. It's very hard to break that. Of course, we want to bring the whole family to Krishna consciousness. And that's the success, right? So we see now that even though the Indian children want to come to Krishna consciousness, their parents sometimes are favorable, and that's good, like that. And a lot of the times that many of the parents who have joined our movement came because of their kids. The kids came first, the parents came next, like that. So this is a formidable obstacle because there is some sentimental or what we say familial attachments that come with that kind of a growing up like that. So therefore Prabhupada used to say preach to your parents, or at least try to make them Krishna conscious. You may not be able to preach to them, but don't neglect them, but don't listen to them either. If they want to do something different like that. Sometimes we go home to visit our parents, but don't stay more than 3 days. After 3 days, you can decide you're definitely going to go downhill. Sometimes after 2 days, sometimes after 1 day, sometimes after 1 hour. Oh, are you getting enough clothes? You look so skinny, you're not eating properly. Here, have this other stuff that you don't eat. I won't mention what it is. It'll make you strong. My mother used to say it all the time. Are they feeding you okay? Yeah, that's no problem. In fact, I'm eating more than I should. But you don't sleep enough. You always look tired. That was one of the criticisms of the anti-cult. They don't allow them to sleep, and therefore their minds are easily controlled because they're right. Sleep deprivation. That was one of the titles of their propaganda. They wake them up at 3:30 in the morning. That's when we go to sleep. My God, what a place. It's torture. And then they give them this thing to wear. It looks like a bed sheet. They're not even proper clothes. And it's in the wintertime, they wear the same thing. It must be cold. Right? Oh, it's terrible what they do to them. Right? It's just like, right? You get it, right? Your parents come home. Are you all right? Are they treating you okay? Right? And if your parents are wealthy and have good positions in society, sometimes they use their money to get you back. It was a nice story. Our Giriraj Maharaj, he's from Chicago. He was born in, what is that place? Glencoe, in Glencoe. Quite wealthy area, comes from a very rich Jewish family. His father was a high court judge in the local area here. So he joined and he went with Prabhupada to India, and he was staying with Prabhupada in Bombay during the time they were building the Radha Rasabihari temple in Bombay. And so his parents came all the way to India to see their son. He was a brahmachari at the time. And, they wanted a showdown with Prabhupada. They were respectful. So Prabhupada was there, and Giriraj had come, and they were sitting in the room together. His mother was crying. She was really crying. His father was very sober, high court judge. And she said, oh, he's not eating properly. Prabhupada told him, you should eat more sandesh, because he was a little skinny. Okay, so Prabhupada kind of acknowledged, or maybe he should eat a little bit more. So his mother was crying, and his father said to Prabhupada, this was in 1972, something like that, I'll give you $1 million if you let my son go. Now he had it too. That was in 1972. This is like almost 50 years ago. Yeah, that's a lot. 40 years ago. That's a lot of money at that time, $1 million. Prabhupada looked at Giriraj and said, "Do you want to go?" Prabhupada wasn't going to argue with the parents. He knew that wasn't the best thing to do. He was going to leave it up to Giriraj to decide. And Giriraj said, "Nope." He was willing to give $1 million. And then his mother cried more, I think. But, he liked Prabhupada. And because he was a gentleman, a respectable high court judge. He could understand Prabhupada had culture, had intelligence, had some value. So he was very respectful, but they were both left on a very unhappy note because they couldn't retrieve their son back to material life. So you see sometimes how far they go out of the way. And Giriraj Maharaj told me, and he told many other persons, that 1 year before his father left the world, which was around the year 2000, he again offered $1 million at that time. After 30-some years later, he tried again. So you see, just think about it. If your parents, maybe some of you have wealthy parents, they say, we'll buy you a nice car, we'll even get you an apartment, everything you want. Just come home, right? Haribol. Come home to what? To suffering. Because the material things cannot give satisfaction to the soul, nor are they important in life. So, but this attachment to family is so strong that it's very difficult to break. Of course, many of us, we've broken that, but the parents don't give up. And sometimes the relatives are there, and so many things. People in India, it happens all the time. The parents come to the temple, sometimes cry, sometimes beg. It's very difficult with Indian families because they're so determined to get their kids back. They'll do anything like that. So you'll see here, it says, it's interesting. The translation says, certainly he had lost his sons, and this was lamentable for Daksha, not for Narada Muni, nor the sons. It was lamentable. Why? Because he wanted them to do what he wanted them to do. He had a mission for them to propagate, the progeny in the world. But they went another path. They went on the path of Dharma. Instead of taking the path of Paritti Marg, they took Niritti. Marg means path. So Niritti means that direct path, the path of renunciation. Pravritti means you get involved with materialistic life and you practice some spirituality also. And then gradually you detach yourself. And then when you get older, then you ultimately come, when you're through materialistic life. But the Nivritti path is what we say, the recommended path. Why? Because it saves a lot of time, energy, and possible deviations from the goal. So one should take the direct path. And here, because they were well behaved, this is very important to understand. Behavior is so important in the execution of Krishna consciousness. Even within the materialistic society, when someone is well behaved, they are also seen as very respectable. They know how to act in relationship to people in different categories of situations. And well behaved and also very learned. They somehow go together. Because well behavior helps you to become learned. When your behavior is right, you can learn. When your behavior is not right, or it's not in line with the proper etiquette, then learning becomes what we say, in one ear and out the other. You don't really manifest. So therefore, Lord Chaitanya has given us the formula for what is that behavior that is what we say ideal for learning. Trinadapi Sudipchena Tayor Iva Sahishnuna Amaninam Amanadena Kirtaniya Sadarahi. By giving respect to all other persons and not asking respect for oneself, by trying to become tolerant in every situation and seeing the hand of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in everything, and at the same time learning one's position as being very dependent on the mercy of the Lord and on the association of devotees, which is also the mercy of the Lord, which allows us to continue to move in the right direction. If you become intolerant, you're deviated from your goal in life. It's easy to become deviated, and intolerance causes us to act in the wrong and think in the wrong way. And respect for others, how can we respect others? Because everyone is part and parcel of Krishna. Therefore, everyone has Krishna within their heart. Even, Prabhupada said, a devotee doesn't even want to kill an insect because he knows that in the heart of that insect, the soul is there, and the super soul is also accompanying every soul in this material world. So that's this culture of behavior is fundamental for knowledge. It's fundamental for knowledge. And as we practice the proper behavior, and then it becomes easy to assimilate the transcendental knowledge that's being spoken and being, what we say, read like that. So therefore, they learned fast because they had already been cultured and learned. They had that already, and therefore it wasn't hard for Narada Muni. He simply just explained, we heard, using an analogy. He used an analogy. He didn't tell them directly what they should do or what they shouldn't do, or give direct, clear philosophical teachings. He gave it in an analogy. An allegory. And they were so intelligent, they could understand the allegory in relationship to their situation. And immediately, they left everything. And they went on to practice self-realization as the goal of life. So, therefore, when the wood is dry, the fire burns quickly. So their wood was very dry. And as soon as it comes in contact with the fire of spirituality, it immediately starts to develop and burn. So when the wood is not dried, one has to continue to hear and practice the culture of etiquette and behavior. And therefore, gradually, one's consciousness will start to evolve through the process of gradual hearing and gradual practice. But behavior is so important. Behavior is so important. And Sanatana Goswami, he said to Srila Haridas Thakur, some people preach, but their behavior is not so ideal, and others, their behavior is ideal, but they don't preach. But you are the best of all Vaishnavas because you are the epitome of behavior, Vaishnava cultural behavior, and you're also preaching. So we want to combine both of these. That's the goal of Krishna consciousness. Practice the culture of behavior in respect to the Lord, the spiritual master, of course the deity, and other Vaishnavas accordingly, and then, develop the knowledge that comes by way of Shastra and Guru, and Krishna too. And gradually, we'll start to feel fixed on the path of devotional service. And then when we become fixed on the path of devotional service, then whatever external challenges may come are just like, little botheration, but nothing important, nothing serious. When we're not fixed, just like if a house doesn't have a good foundation, maybe a strong wind can blow it down, but if the foundation's strong, can't move it. It's like in not California, but in Florida. There's a lot of hurricanes in Florida, right? So they build these houses that are hurricane-proof, where they can stand winds of 125 miles an hour. But sometimes the winds are even faster. So they have to keep building stronger places. So we want to make our foundation strong through hearing and chanting the holy names of the Lord, but cultivating the proper etiquette. So we learn from the higher ashras. They were behaved, learned, and of course advanced like that. They were ready to do the work of their father, but their real father, in the form of the spiritual master, came and brought them the real goal of life. Because material life is not the purpose of life. Material activities may be necessary in order to keep the body together and the mind, but they're not the goal of life, nor can they bring happiness and satisfaction. Therefore, only spirituality, which is of the nature of the living being, the nature of the living being is spiritual. Therefore, only spiritual things can satisfy the heart and mind of the living entity, like that. So Narada Muni, he's criticized, right? We get criticized taking our children away from their children away to Krishna, right? Sometimes the spiritual masters were approached by very angry parents like that and threatened like that. But still, as Narada Muni did our duty, we have to do our duty. It's our duty because Krishna Mata, Krishna Pita, Krishna Dhanapran. So Krishna is your real mother, Krishna is your real father, Krishna is your real life and soul, Krishna is the purpose of life. That has to be understood clearly, and then once we do that, we can understand we have to tolerate the difficulties and challenges and even attachments that we have in this material world. Just tolerate. That's all. There's two principles that make devotional service what we say successful. We have to learn to tolerate, and we also have to be very, very patient. Because the process works gradually. But if you stay in it, stay focused, stay fixed, keep the association strong, make the holy name your foremost of all activities, along with the association of Vaishnavas, and hear and discuss the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, it becomes susukam kartam avyayam, becomes very joyful. And we have so much to do. And material life is simply a diversion from the real goal of life, like that. So, and it gets more juicier as it goes on here. Daksha somehow or other, he just kind of tolerates it, gets a little angry and upset, and produces some more kids. And Narada does it again, giving you a little preview of the future. So, he's not going to be, what we say, swayed by the angry father. Okay. And Prabhupada says, why do the parents want them to come back? To be improved in economic development and materialistic. And it's the most amazing. If your son becomes a hippie, smokes pot, gets in trouble, chases after girls, it's not so bad. But if you could become a Hare Krishna, oh my God, it's like one of the 10 offenses against material life, Major offense. It's the Hasti Aparad. Yeah. They don't mind if their kids go off on the deep end in the material life, but don't become a Hare Krishna. Whoo! How do I explain it to your friend, to your family members? My son's a Hare Krishna. Oh boy, that's really a hard one to explain. There goes our whole family lineage right down the drain. Everything we worked for the last 5,000 years is going down now. You're a discredit to the family. You're like, that's what Prahlad Maharaj, Rani Kashipu told that to Prahlad Maharaj. You're just, it says that when a limb becomes atrophied or diseased, if you don't deal with it and cut it off, then it might destroy the whole body. So Rani Kashipu, he was a great materialist. He wanted his son to be like him. Prahlad wasn't movable. He understood that, so he said, better I kill you than let you go on in the wrong direction, right? Siding with my enemy, right? So there's so many amazing pastimes with parents. In fact, there was one situation which cost us a major court case. It's called the Robin George case. You must have heard of that. It was interesting, Robin George case. A girl came to the temple, and then she was recaptured like that. She went back. Then her parents brought a lawsuit because she was underage. That was the problem. She was underage, and then they brought a lawsuit against her, and they sued us for $32 million. That was in the 70s, the Robin George case. It was a major case. Chicago was involved in that case also. Our lawyers fought for years and years and years. Finally, the settlement went down to $2.6 million, like that. And we had to pay, like that. But Robin George, she was actually a plant that was set up by the government to destroy our movement, because she was in cahoots with the whole thing. And when she said yes, they forced me to stay here and so many things. Therefore, now we don't allow people who are underage, who are still under parental guidance, to stay in the temples. That means if you're under 18, you can't live in the, right? Yeah, like that. We've had many cases. That's just one of them. That was another one. Whew, that one is still... We paid many millions of dollars. So, it's a constant thing because people don't understand the Hare Krishna movement. We actually went to court in New York, and we were brought to court for brainwashing. And the lawyers were all set up. Prabhupada, you can read the history. Prabhupada was prompting the devotees, when you get into court, just preach. Just preach. And Prabhupada was getting everyone fired up. They say, we are brainwashing. Yes, we are brainwashing because your brains are dirty. Therefore, it's the principle of a civilized country to cleanse. Therefore, your illicit sex, meat eating, intoxication, gambling, this is all dirt, and we're just trying to cleanse your dirty brain. Preach like that. He was on fire. If you hit her in the hit, Prabhupada was really like the Sringadev. And the devotees took it, and they went to court. And it was in the Supreme Court. It was in New York, Syracuse, New York. They held the case, and the devotees just took out the scriptures and just started quoting scripture. And we won the case in one day. They threw out all. Prabhupada was so happy. They threw it out. The Supreme Court of New York actually made a statement that this religion is actually a historical tradition that comes from India and it has roots in scripture. They made a beautiful statement. I use that statement even today now to back up any kind of problems we have. You can find that statement. You've seen it? Yeah, he writes in the purport. But if there's one book where he just, I think it's one of the biographies of Prabhupada. It just tells the whole story. It's amazing. Prabhupada had a battle a lot of times, all this stuff. And he was always firing up the devotees. Well, one time, we lost one case because the prosecution lawyer said, he came with a picture in the Sringadev, and he said to the jury, this is the God they worship. This is the God they worship. And what are they going to think? They're all Westerners, right? This guy's tearing apart somebody, and this is their Lord. But the devotee didn't stand up for Nrsingadev. He couldn't really say the right things, and therefore we lost that case. Prabhupada said, you should have told him who Nrsingadev was, you know. If you don't behave, he's going to get you too. So it was really a major. So I think we've been through so many court cases like this. But now we're on record in some places as established bona fide religious tradition. And still, even today, I had to go to court a few years ago, and I had to gather all this information just to give the authenticity to our religion, to back up some devotees who were in jail and wanted, vegetarian diets. They want to know what is the history of your culture and religion before we can actually authorize anything different than what the general population of the jails get. So, yeah, it's like that. So, I don't know if any of you here have any parental problems, but if you do, just get some advice and don't surrender to Maya. Because ultimately, if you stay, even if your parents are unfavorable, after some time, as they see, if they're somewhat respectable parents, after some time they say, "Oh, my son is actually a nice boy. He's respectful to me more than he ever has been before. He's not doing any bad things anymore like he used to." Right? And they like that. So we see many cases like that. So you can actually change your parents if you stay determined in your practice like that. And then sometimes they actually become devotees eventually. Okay, any questions? Yes, in the back there.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. How does one assimilate to Vedic culture without
How do we assimilate Vedic culture?
without more or less losing a sense of who you are or your identity, and try to make this a part of your life on a practical level while living in this Western culture?
Well, I understand your question goes beyond just practice. Really, you really need to associate with devotees, because you have to really associate with those who are ideal in their behavior and in their practice. And that way you can also learn that. We hear about it philosophically and we try to practice it according to what we know, but when we actually see it and associate with it, it rubs off. So therefore, one should always seek out, saintly association whenever possible. Like that, to learn both the philosophy and the etiquette, the behavior like that. That will gradually become part of our internal mood as we more or less make advancement through our chanting. Practice. Therefore, whatever you want to be, you have to practice. And when you in practice, you have to have some kind of role models to work with. Just the philosophy alone is helpful, but the role models is really what helps us to move forward in developing the proper etiquette and behavior that's necessary. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes. What is your name? Mike?
How do we deal with family members?
Yeah.
How do we deal with family members that are, let's say, fanatically following another religion? For example, Roman Catholicism.
What's the example?
Roman Catholicism.
Roman Catholicism. Fanatically? Well, that's a common occurrence also. It depends. If they're open, if they're fanatical, usually they don't want to hear anything else, right? Well, we just say, God is not Christian, God is not Hindu, God is not Jewish, God is not Islam. God is God. He's above all these things. These are designations for ways to practice. Spirituality is something that is innate within the quality of the living beings. You can't change your spiritual existence, but you can change how you practice. So these different, we don't call them religions. Prabhupada gave the definition of religion. He said religion means to follow the laws of God. So following the laws of God as a Hindu or someone in that culture, or Hare Krishna, or Roman Catholic, or whatever, means that you follow the principles and tenets of your practice accordingly. And then you become religious. These are faith paths. Religion cannot change. Faith can change. Faith paths can change. A person can convert from one to another. That doesn't mean that's a religion. Religion means the laws of God that don't change. Like that. So if that person's a little bit open, you can discuss these things. If they're not, then you will have to just continue to go on with your own way. Because fanatic means someone who really doesn't want to know anything else. Lord Chaitanya says the number one enemy of true religious principles is sectarianism and party spirit. My way or the highway, right? But God is not limited. We tell the story of the elephant and the blind man. You know that story? There's an elephant and six blind men. An elephant. So one blind man, he comes up and he grabs the trunk of the elephant. And he says, the elephant is like a snake. Someone grabs his tail, he says, the elephant is like a rope. Someone grabs his leg, the elephant's like a pillar. His ear. So each grabs a different part of the elephant and says what the elephant is. But because they don't see the whole elephant, they can't understand. So religion is like that. They see a little part of something, they think they have the whole picture. You stand on the side of the mountain and you look at the mountain. What you're seeing is what you can see. You can't see the other side, nor can you see the top. But if you go above the mountain, then you see the whole mountain. So these other faith paths, they have what we say a certain limited view of spirituality. And they think it's the whole thing. They think it's the whole thing. So the deeper you go into the practice and teachings of your own tradition, the more you can see that same thing in others. So people who are fanatic, they're superficial. They don't really know their own tradition. Basically, if he gets too heavy with you, you can just basically say, you don't even know who you are. You don't even know how to practice your own religion. If you want to get into it, Because when you understand the nature of God, you can see God wherever God is being worshipped. We use the example, a dog. A dog knows his master. So if the master's dressed in a bathrobe, he sees him. The master's dressed in a suit, he knows it's his master. The master's dressed in a bathing suit, he knows him. He comes out naked. Still, he knows him. He knows his master in whatever way he's dressed. So if you can't see that, then you're less than a dog. That's what we say. A dog can understand his master. We can't. We see the master only in one way. Therefore, we don't really know the master. So God comes in different forms, in different ways, different levels of teaching throughout the history of mankind to teach according to time, place, and circumstance. So you practice your tradition, but you should be able to see that same Lord being worshipped in other traditions. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that. There's a beautiful article that explains that there's 5 external differences between the practice of different religions, but the fundamental is the same. The language, the way the worship may be conducted, the images that is being worshipped like that, these are external. But what is the goal? And what is religion? Or what is spirituality? Is that to awaken one's attraction for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And there's symptoms. So what is the symptoms? That one is losing their attachment for material life. You see many people who are fanatical in their spirituality, they're still very attached to material life. They still even do sinful activities and say it's okay. Let's go play bingo. Yeah. Bingo. Been gone. He's gone. He went on a binge and he's gone. And bingo, it's just gambling, right? Right? It's gambling. So we know that a lot of the things that go on in the name of religion is actually just in other forms of material activities. Therefore, if he's a little sensitive, he can see you're giving up meat eating, illicit sex, intoxication, and gambling. Who can do that? Challenge him. Can you do that? You think you're so attached to, you think you know what is God? We're giving up sinful life, and you're not. And you can't just give it up unless you have something higher. And that's important to understand. To follow these four regs means you have to have a higher taste. Otherwise, if that higher taste doesn't develop, we'll be inclined to look towards these things again. So, therefore, we can show by example that we're giving up sinful activities and worshiping God. Now, most fanatics are not logical, anyway. That's the problem. You can defeat them, you can show everything, and at the same time, they just, stay the way they are. That's Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga, and years ago, if someone defeated another one with a higher philosophy, that person would have to surrender the way they believe and follow that person, that what they lost. That was Vedic culture. Nowadays, nobody has any value, so they can't say anything, but they just go on the same way they do it. It's just like, this is Kali Yuga. There's no quality of value, people. People don't have any worth because they've been in so much sense gratification. Sense gratification makes you stupid. You actually become stupid. Yeah, really. Not just dumb, but stupid. I guess dumb is a higher level of stupidity. I don't know, but the stupid is something that's constant. Dumb is something that comes and goes, right? Yeah. People don't know who they are. You ask them who they are, and they don't know. They tell you their name or something about their body. But nobody knows that they're not this body. And Krishna taught that the first principle. That's the first thing he taught in Bhagavad Gita, the difference between the body and the soul. And he spent something like 29 verses, or something like that, something like 20 verses or more, just speaking about the difference between the body and the soul. And that's preliminary. That's not even spirituality. That's a basis where you can work towards spirituality. And people don't even know that. And they call themselves, religious. You have to know you're not this body, or at least you have to know it theoretically, and then you can know it practically after some time. So there's many arguments, depends on how open he is to argument like that. But don't waste your time if he's not open. Yeah, it's worth one try, but he's just stubborn, then what can you do? But don't let anybody change you, because this knowledge that you're getting is Vedic knowledge is not created by man. Tene Brahma Hida Adhikavaya. It's coming from the Lord Himself. It's mentioned Chaitanya Charitamrita that other religious scriptures are man-made, some of them. And therefore there's a lot of mistakes in them. But the Vedas are not man-made. They're coming from the Lord Himself directly into the heart of Lord Brahma. We don't speak like that, but generally just to give us an understanding of what value we have. This knowledge is the greatest of all knowledge. You won't find anything anywhere. And if you don't believe me, well, you may believe me, but for those who don't, make an experiment and just, what we say, objectively compare this knowledge with whatever's available anywhere. And you will never be able to compare. It doesn't leave out anything. Anything you want to know, materially or spiritually, can be found within the Vedic scriptures. Everything. That's perfect. Why? Because it's coming from the perfect. It's called Aparushad. Aparushad means not man-made. This philosophy is not man-made. It's coming from God. So, spoken by God. And spoken by those who are pure in their devotion to God also. Okay, does that help? Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? I guess that one was the question of all questions, huh? Okay. All right, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Ram. Hare Krishna Mahamantra ki jai. Nityananda Pran. Nityananda Pran. Is there a Bhagavad Gita class at night?
But there's not Bhagavad Gita class in the temple room.
Yeah.
But there is Bhakti Shastri type of study for the booths downstairs in the indoctrination room.
At the same time?
7 o'clock.
There's two different things going on?
No, it's not.
Oh, so there's no Gita class. Oh.
It's an experiment to see how things are, because the devotees were expressing that sitting in the temple room is very distracting to them. People come and go. So they wanted a smaller room. It's just them.